At my son's engagement, he raised a toast to another man as his real dad. So I quietly pulled his $32,000 wedding fund, canceled his apartment lease, and disappeared like he said I would. I was 48, long divorced, and a father who truly believed he knew his son better than anyone else. But all that illusion shattered one evening, at a fancy downtown engagement dinner, when the boy I'd raised opened his mouth, raised a glass, and publicly dismissed me as if I'd been a ghost haunting his childhood. What he said didn't just embarrass me. It made 2 decades of love, sacrifice, and unquestioned devotion crumble in a moment. But to understand why that sentence crushed me the way it did, you'd need to go all the way back. Back to when Aiden was just a 9-year-old boy, and I was still holding on to hope that love could be enough to hold a family together. Laura and I had been married for 10 years, a comfortable marriage that slowly deteriorated without explosive arguments or infidelity. Just 2 people drifting away like 2 boats with their sails pointed in opposite directions. There were no fights loud enough to echo down the halls, no dramatic endings worthy of a movie. Just a quiet, mutually agreed separation that felt more like a resignation than a breakup. We shared custody of Aiden, who was only 9 at the time, and though I moved about an hour away, I made a vow to myself that day, no matter how much life changed, I would always show up for my son. And I did. Every weekend, without fail. I'd work late Friday, get into my car, drive through rain, snow, traffic, and exhaustion just to pick him up. Then come Sunday night, I'd make that long trip again to drop him off. I didn't miss a weekend. I didn't make excuses. I didn't complain. I just showed up. And it wasn't just about showing up. I paid every single child support check right on time. Not once did I skip a payment. But I did more than the minimum. I paid for summer camps, baseball leagues, birthday parties, private SAT tutors. When he mentioned once that he loved classic rock, I saved up and bought him a cherry red guitar when he was 12. That guitar followed him from bedroom to dorm room to first apartment, sitting proudly on a stand as if it were a trophy, and in a way it was a trophy of fatherly devotion that I never asked to be recognized for. I wasn't a perfect father, no one is, but I was there. And that consistency, that unshakable presence, that quiet reliability, was what I believed fatherhood was supposed to be. Then, when Aiden turned 15, Laura remarried. That's when Mark entered the picture. I still remember the first time I met him. Mark was one of those guys who could light up a room without trying. Sharp suit, firm handshake, a laugh loud enough to dominate conversations. I remember thinking, if he's good to Aiden, then I'll stay out of the way. I meant that. I believed truly that the more people who loved my son, the better. But what I didn't expect was how completely Mark would weave himself into Aiden's life. He didn't just marry Laura. He coached Aiden's high school baseball team. He took him on ski trips I couldn't afford. He helped him choose colleges. He was at every school event, smiling, cheering, present. Slowly, gradually, my son began to drift. Our phone calls became shorter. Sometimes he'd cancel weekends. Sorry, Dad. I've got a job shadow with Mark. Or Mark's helping me prep for an interview. And I tried not to let it bother me. I told myself this was what teenagers did. They grew up. They found mentors. They pulled away. But inside, it felt like my role was shifting from father to background character in a story I'd spent years writing. Still, I kept showing up. Even when I felt like a backup option. Even when the calls stopped. Even when it felt like I was giving and giving into a vacuum. Because that's what fathers do. They don't quit when it stops feeling fair. They stay, they show up, they try. A month ago, Aiden called and invited me to his engagement dinner. It was going to be held at an expensive Italian restaurant downtown. Would love for you to come, Dad. It would mean a lot. I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a while. Hope. That maybe I still mattered to him. That maybe I'd been wrong. That maybe the gap between us could be closed. I dressed in the same navy blazer I'd worn to his high school graduation. I even bought him a gift. A vintage watch, carefully selected because I knew his love for classic styles. I wrapped it gently and slipped it into my coat pocket, planning to give it to him at just the right moment. When I walked in, Laura and Mark were already seated. They greeted me politely, cordially, but with that hollow kind of warmth that you only reserve for people you'd rather not talk to. The kind of politeness that comes with history you'd rather pretend doesn't exist. I took my seat and tried to focus on Aiden. He looked so grown up, beaming, holding hands with his fiancée, laughing. And I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, I was still part of his story. Dinner was lovely, the food, the company, the atmosphere. People took photos, shared stories, laughed. And then, toward the end, Aiden stood up. He tapped his fork gently on his glass to signal a toast. I looked up, smiling, expecting him to thank everyone for coming. Maybe say something kind about his mother. Maybe even mention me. What he said instead made my chest feel like it had been cracked open with a crowbar. I just want to thank the man who taught me what it means to be a real father, he said, looking straight at Mark. Mark, my stepdad. My biological dad only taught me how to leave. There was laughter. Some people chuckled. A few glanced around awkwardly. Laura laughed too loud. Mark tried to look humble. And I just sat there, my smile frozen, my heart heavy, my mind blank. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I just reached into my pocket, pulled out the watch, and handed it to him. Congratulations, I said, voice even. Wishing you both the best. Then I got up from my chair, walked out of the restaurant, and didn't look back. I didn't sleep that night. Not out of anger. Not even out of sadness. It was something else. A quiet kind of grief that comes from realizing you've been written out of a story you thought you were the hero of. That night, after I left the restaurant, I drove for hours without knowing where I was headed. The highway lights blurred against my windshield, and the city slowly gave way to silence. I pulled over by a gas station just outside town and sat there, hands on the steering wheel, staring out at nothing. I wasn't crying, the pain had moved past that point. It was a numbness, like someone had flipped a switch inside me. A lifelong movie was playing backward in my mind. Every ride to baseball practice, every late-night conversation, every missed promotion at work so I could afford his school fees. And for what? So he could stand in front of everyone and credit another man for the life I built? In the days that followed, I didn't answer his calls. Not because I wanted to be petty, but because I needed space to feel everything without having to justify my emotions. I needed silence. I needed to breathe without hearing excuses. Because I knew, deep down, that call would come. And it did. Not immediately, but a week later, while I was sitting in my office, trying to focus on the quarterly reports, my phone buzzed. Hey Dad, the message said. Can we talk? I think I messed up. And I just stared at that screen. For a full minute. I didn't respond. Not yet. What Aiden didn't know was that I had quietly funded nearly every major expense he'd faced in the last 2 years. That downtown apartment he loved so much? I co-signed the lease, paid the first 6 months' rent as a graduation gift. The wedding venue deposit came from a private fund I'd been saving for years. A $32,000 wedding fund meant for him to use however he wanted when he found the one. Even the car he drove to work every day was registered under my name. And as I sat there, reading his text over and over, I made a decision. Not out of spite, but out of clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when you realize you've given too much of yourself to people who took you for granted. That evening, I made a few phone calls. I contacted the venue, citing my name as the financial sponsor on the contract. I canceled the check. I called the leasing office and informed them that I would not be renewing the apartment lease. I told them the payments would end at the close of the month. I also called the insurance company and had the car policy transferred back to me, along with the registration. Then I emailed Aiden, not a long letter, not a rant, just a simple message. Since I was never really a father to you, I assume you'd prefer I not support you like one. I've ended all financial contributions moving forward. I wish you a beautiful wedding. No threats, no anger, just a clean exit. The fallout was immediate. He called me 4 times that night, then left voicemails, then texts. Dad, please. I was nervous during the speech. Came out wrong. You know I didn't mean that. Another message. Mark helped me a lot, but that doesn't mean you didn't. It was a dumb joke. And then, Are you really canceling everything? Seriously. But I didn't respond. Not because I was cruel, but because I needed him to feel the full weight of his actions without me softening the blow like I always had. I needed him to understand that words matter. That love isn't a guarantee. That even fathers have limits. A week later, Laura called. First time in years. Her voice was cool but coated in sugar. I heard about what happened. Don't you think you're overreacting a bit? He's just a kid. He got carried away. I laughed, just once. A short, bitter sound. He's 25, Laura. He's not a kid. And if he's man enough to toast another man as his father, he's man enough to build his life without me. She went quiet for a moment, then said, "You're really just going to walk away?" I didn't even hesitate. He asked me to, in front of a room full of people. After that, I did something I hadn't done in a long time. I took a vacation. Booked a small cabin by a lake up north. No cell service. No noise. Just water, pine trees, and a stack of old books I'd been meaning to read. For the first time in years, I slept without checking my phone in the morning. I drank coffee on the deck, watching the sunrise over the lake, and realized that peace wasn't something someone gave you. It was something you took back for yourself. 2 weeks later, when I finally returned home, there was a letter waiting in my mailbox. Handwritten. From Aiden. Dad, I don't know if you'll even read this. I don't deserve that much. I was an idiot. What I said at the engagement dinner wasn't just a mistake. It was a betrayal. You were the one who raised me, who showed up when no one else did. And I tried to rewrite that because I wanted Mark to feel important. But I forgot that you never needed a spotlight. You were always just there, quietly making everything work. I'm sorry. Not just for what I said, but for all the years I let you fade into the background. If you don't want to be at the wedding, I understand. But I hope someday, I'll deserve a place back in your life. I read that letter 3 times, and then I put it in a drawer. Not because I was done with him, but because I wasn't ready. Love doesn't die overnight. But trust? That's another story. A month later, I heard through a mutual friend that Aiden and his fiancée had postponed the wedding. They'd moved into a smaller apartment. He'd gotten a second job to cover expenses. I didn't step in. I let him figure it out. Because sometimes, the best thing a father can do isn't to rescue his son. It's to let him stand on his own feet and decide what kind of man he wants to be. We eventually did meet again. Quietly. In a park where I used to push him on swings as a boy. He looked older than I remembered. Not in years, but in understanding. He hugged me without saying a word. And I let him. Because sometimes forgiveness doesn't start with words. It starts with silence. With presence. With acknowledging the damage without trying to paint over it. And as we sat on that park bench, watching kids run across the grass, he finally spoke. "You're still my dad," he said, "even if I forgot it for a while." I looked at him. My son. The boy who'd broken my heart. The man who'd found his way back. And I said, "Then earn that title back. Not with words, but with how you live." And he nodded. If you've ever been taken for granted by the people you loved the most, let this story be a reminder. You're allowed to walk away from those who can't see your worth. Like and subscribe for more powerful stories.